At 68 years old, Margaret Elizabeth Shaw believed her life was nearing its quiet final chapters. She never expected love to find her again. Not after burying the only man she thought she'd ever need. Not after years of lonely evenings, sitting by the glow of a single lamp, her house echoing with silence. But in the spring of 2023, Margaret did something she hadn't done in decades. She packed a suitcase for love. She painted her nails, slipped on a lavender dress, and boarded a plane toward what she thought was a new beginning. By dawn the next morning, she was lying barefoot on the side of a rural Georgia road. Her face bruised, her body bloodied, her phone missing, her vagina torn from a violent assault. The man she thought was her soulmate had vanished. And here's the truth that would shatter everything. The man she flew to meet, Jaden Brooks, didn't exist. Margaret Shaw was born in 1955 in Grand Rapids, Michigan, when the loudest sound on her street was the church bell and children still played with jump ropes on cracked sidewalks. Her father was a deacon, her mother a retired schoolteacher. They weren't wealthy, but they gave Margaret what mattered most, a home filled with faith and books. She was quiet, polite, but sharp. She corrected adults on their grammar, carried sharpened pencils like soldiers, and cried the first time she read Their Eyes Were Watching God. By 11, she had cleared the children's section of her local library. By 13, she was borrowing from the adult shelves, where she discovered Toni Morrison, Maya Angelou, and James Baldwin. She never went to prom. She never cared for high school parties. She hid inside novels instead. While other girls wore corsages, Margaret wore the words of poets like Armour. In her 30s, she became a librarian, room 3B, second floor, poetry section. She worked there for 38 years, wearing soft cardigans and glasses that constantly slid down her nose. She treated books like people, gently, reverently, and spoke to them as if they could listen. She did marry, once. Harold, a mechanic with hands rough from engines but gentle when they held hers. He was 15 years older, and she met him at a church rummage sale. He asked her what her favorite book was. She told him Beloved. He bought a copy, even though he couldn't pronounce Toni Morrison's name. That was Harold. Kind, uncomplicated, steady. They tried for children. But in 1994, a miscarriage ended that dream. Margaret buried the grief in silence. They never spoke of it again. In 2017, Harold died quietly in his sleep. A heart attack, no warning, just a pair of shoes left by the door that would never be picked up again. Margaret froze time. His tools stayed in the garage, his chair stayed in the living room, his name stayed on the mailbox until 2020. And Margaret? She stopped smiling. By 2022, Margaret's life was smaller than it had ever been. She volunteered twice a week at a literacy center, baked muffins for the pastor's wife, lit a candle for Harold every Sunday. She had no children, no one to call at night, and no one to call her name in the morning. She told herself she didn't mind. She had her books, she had her faith. But silence is cruel. It seeps into walls, into skin, until even music feels like an intruder. And one night, while shuffling through old papers, she found a forgotten poem she had written years ago. Just a single haunting line. What does a woman do when the world stops looking at her? She stared at the words for hours. Then, for reasons she couldn't quite explain, she turned on her old desktop computer and searched for something she hadn't sought in decades. Not love, not even companionship. Just someone who might answer her question. That was the night she found him. His name, at least the one he gave her, was Jaden Brooks. 22 years old. A poet from Atlanta. His first message called her poem gentle yet aching and compared it to Baldwin's Rainstorms. Margaret felt something stir in her chest. No one had spoken to her like that in years. At first, it was innocent. They swapped book recommendations, sent poems back and forth, discussed Hughes and Angelou like old friends. But within days, Margaret was waiting for his messages, with a quiet eagerness she hadn't known since Harold. Jaden didn't flirt. Not in the way men sometimes mocked older women. Instead, he asked about her curtains, her garden, the first time Harold had made her laugh. He asked how she carried her grief. And then came the voice notes. Soft, steady, intimate. Margaret played them at night, letting his voice echo through rooms that had forgotten what a man sounded like. When he asked a video call, she hesitated. She was 68, with gray hair and tired eyes. But he insisted. "I just want to see you smile," he said. The calls were always short, never more than a minute. He said it was bad Wi-Fi, limited data, but his face looked kind, his smile warm, and his eyes never strayed from hers. Margaret didn't know that the face wasn't his at all. Behind every flicker of those calls was AI-powered deception, real-time face mapping software that allowed a stranger to overlay another man's features onto his own. He kept the lights dim, the calls short, to avoid glitches. While Margaret felt chosen, he was recording, observing, harvesting her trust. His real name wasn't Jaden. It was Terrell Vance, a 51-year-old ex-IT worker from North Carolina, twice divorced, unemployed, drifting between cheap rentals with a burner laptop, a folder of stolen identities, and enough tech knowledge to turn lies into living. Terrell was part of a loosely connected network of scammers. They weren't after Instagram influencers or careless teenagers. Their prey was deliberate. Women over 60, widows, divorcees, retired teachers, and yes, librarians like Margaret. Women who listened, women who trusted, women who still believed in soulmates. They found them in poetry forums, church support groups, grief circles. They watched, waited, and chose carefully. By the time Terrell spoke to Margaret, he already knew her address, her bank, the model of her phone. He embedded trackers in links he sent her, convinced her to install a messaging app that logged her keystrokes, mirrored her phone to his computer. Margaret thought she was falling in love. Terrell was building a map of her life. For 7 months, their relationship bloomed in the shadows of a lie. He called her Empress. He told her she was timeless. He made her believe Harold wouldn't be her last love. And then, in March 2023, the invitation came. "Come to me, Empress," he said. "I want to hold you. I want to show you. I mean it." Margaret froze. She thought about Harold, about the silence he left behind. She thought about all the years of loneliness, the poems she wrote in margins no one read. And when she looked at her phone again, she whispered one word that unraveled everything. Yes. The next morning, Margaret moved like a woman reborn. She pulled earrings from a drawer she hadn't opened in years, painted her nails lavender, tucked satin slippers into her suitcase. She didn't tell her friends. She didn't tell her church circle. She wrote it only once, in her journal. "He wants me to come. I think this is real." She withdrew $4,000, more money than she had ever spent on something frivolous. She booked a round-trip ticket to Atlanta. She packed her Bible, her journal, 2 dresses, and a bottle of rosewater spray. On the 9th of April, 2023, Margaret Shaw kissed the silence goodbye. She boarded her flight, her heart full of trembling hope. Seat 12 amperes, window view. She didn't fidget. She didn't chat. She sat with her hands folded, watching clouds roll beneath her, whispering softly, "It's time." Her phone buzzed as the plane touched down in Atlanta. It was his voice again, warm, soft, rehearsed. "Hey, Empress, I can't wait to see you, but I'm stuck getting things ready. I want your first night to be perfect. I'm sending a friend to pick you up. Just let yourself be treated like the queen you are." Margaret's eyes filled. No one had ever said that to her before. Not like that. She pressed the phone to her ear and whispered back, "Okay." And with that one word, trust, sealed her fate. At 6:26 p.m., she stepped into a stranger's car outside Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. A bouquet of sunflowers waited in his hand. Margaret smiled. She believed. She texted her sister once. "Just landed. His friend picked me up. I'll call you tomorrow." Her sister replied, "Call me when you're settled. I don't care how late." The message was never read. He didn't care. That much was clear from the moment he left her on that cold floor. The nameless house was silent, its walls indifferent, its shadows complicit. Margaret Shaw lay half-naked, bleeding, and broken. She had been violated, discarded, forgotten, but not dead. By morning, She crawled. April 10th, 2023, 5:32 in the morning. The sky over Georgia was soft with dawn colors, the quiet kind of morning that looked like it could belong to anyone. Route 166 stretched ahead, long cracked pavements slicing through pine trees. Margaret Shaw was barefoot, her nightgown torn, her face swollen on one side, her knees scraped, her arm limp at her side. She dragged herself forward. She didn't wave for help. She didn't scream. Every step blistered her feet, yet she kept going. For nearly 2.5 miles, she walked. Nobody stopped, nobody asked, she didn't look back. At 6 a.m., a MARTA bus came through the outer edge of Route 166. The driver, Curtis Minton, had been on that loop for 8 years. He knew the rhythm of the road, every pothole, every broken lamp. But that morning, something broke the pattern. In his rear view, he saw her. At first, she looked like another stranded traveler, maybe car trouble, maybe left behind after a fight. But then she stumbled, not like someone tripping, but like someone's body giving out beneath them. Curtis slowed, hazards blinking. He opened the door. She didn't speak, didn't raise her head. Her torn gown, her swollen eye, the blood on her thighs told the story for her. Her feet were raw. Her steps weighted as if gravity itself wanted her to collapse. Curtis didn't press. He didn't crowd her. He called it in, voice steady over the radio. Female, on Route 166, looks hurt. Elderly, no shoes, bleeding. Need someone out here. For 10 minutes, until the patrol car arrived, he gave her what no one else had. A quiet company. A place to stop moving. A moment to breathe. When the officer pulled up, Margaret didn't collapse. She didn't scream. She climbed into the cruiser with slow, deliberate steps. At the station, she gave her name clearly. Margaret Shaw. I need to get home. No details about the man. No confession of the house. No explanation of the blood. She simply waited for someone to listen. The hospital processed her like another case file. A rape kit, photos, notes of her bruises, her torn wrist. But no forced entry, no cameras, no confirmed suspect. Just another woman, calm and cooperative, left in the cracks of the system. 3 hours later, she walked out with injuries, a bill she couldn't afford, and a shelter hoodie 2 sizes too big. By the 11th of April, she was on a Greyhound bus heading north to Michigan, seat 7C. Hoodie pulled low, black sweatpants dragging over socks, wrist wrapped in a sling. She gripped her purse strap like it might vanish. She didn't speak, didn't eat, didn't sleep. She sat through Memphis, Louisville, Indianapolis, staring at nothing while the world blurred past at 65 miles an hour. When she finally reached Grand Rapids, there was no one waiting. The porch light she forgot to turn off still glowed. Her ivy plant had wilted. No neighbors asked questions. No one even knew she'd been gone. The system moved on, but Margaret didn't. For a week, she stayed quiet. She filed a fraud claim. She checked the mail for letters that never came. The police called once, then never again. But Margaret wasn't the same woman anymore. The waiting ended. The believing ended. The hope that someone else would fix it ended. She began her own investigation. Margaret printed every message, every screenshot. She learned IP tracking at the library, bought a used laptop with cash, and followed the digital fingerprints he'd left behind. She no longer baked for the church women's circle. She no longer logged into her poetry forum. She made lists, not of dreams, but of clues. Because if no one else would find him, she would. The 25th of April, she sat at her kitchen table. Bank statements spread before her. The numbers were wrong, small withdrawals, wire transfers, accounts closed. Everything her late husband Harold left her, everything she had saved, chipped away by someone else's hand. The fraud division stalled. The detective hadn't returned her call in 12 days. She knew what that meant. Quiet cases die in drawers. So she dialed another number. Hidden in the back of an old phone book, under investigations, she found a name, Carmen Ricks, a retired NYPD cybercrimes investigator, now private, known only in survivor forums, no website, just a P.O. box and a prepaid cell. Margaret left a message. 10 minutes later, Carmen called back. They talked for 41 minutes. Margaret's voice never broke. She listed everything, every app, every strange instruction, every login, every word he'd ever sent. Carmen listened, then asked one question. "Are you sure you want to know who he really is?" Margaret didn't hesitate. "I want to know everything." Carmen got to work. She pulled metadata from Margaret's deleted emails, tracked unusual logins. 3 came from Charlotte, North Carolina, a Dunkin', a budget motel called Sleepwell, and a coffee shop near a Greyhound station. Cross-device analytics, breach logs, and surveillance databases tied it together. The username Jaden never appeared, but 2 handles did, Nova Inc. 7 and Starforge. The real name, Terrell D. Vance, 51 years old. Suspended license, prior fraud charge, history of burner phones and prepaid rentals. Not 22, not a poet, not a lover, a predator. Carmen suspected there were more victims. These men rarely stop at one. So Margaret and Carmen went public, carefully. They posted his fake profiles in catfish exposure groups, survivor forums, and emailed women who had shared similar warnings. 3 months later, in July, Margaret received an email. Subject: Need to talk. Attached was a selfie. A woman, late 50s, with a bouquet of sunflowers at her side. A man's hand rested on her shoulder. She said his name was Jaden. She said he had invited her to Atlanta. The same script. The same promises. Her name was Tyra Ellison. Charlotte, North Carolina. Margaret called Carmen immediately. The screenshots matched. Same phrases, same emojis, same midnight pacing of replies. It was him. They warned Tyra. She agreed to help. A trap was set. Thursday, the 13th of July. Charlotte Greyhound Station, 4:40 p.m. Unmarked police cars surrounded the south side entrance. Tyra wore a wire. Margaret sat 2 blocks away in Carmen's car, watching a live stream from the detective's tablet. At 4:39, he appeared. Denim jacket, baseball cap, bouquet of sunflowers in hand. Calm, steady, like this was routine. When Tyra stepped forward, he smiled, raised the flowers. 2 officers moved in. He didn't fight, didn't yell. He only said one thing to Tyra, as the cuffs closed around his wrists. "You weren't supposed to bring anyone." The phone in his pocket was wiped, but inside his duffel, police found burner, SIM cards, a hard drive, a notebook with at least 9 names. His prints confirmed it. Terrell DeVance. He was booked on multiple charges: fraud, identity theft, sexual battery. Bond denied. When investigators cracked his devices, they uncovered more than anyone expected. Over 300 digital profiles, widows' grief forums, Christian dating apps, hospice chat rooms, poetry boards, cancer survivor groups. Every alias different. Every bio designed for women over 60. He kept logs of conversations like trophies, dates, passwords, screenshots. 7 women came forward. Gwendolyn Price, 66, wired him $1,500 for a memorial project after her daughter died. Ruth Delgado, 71, sent grocery cards. Linda Cheney, 64, lost her savings 2 days after he stood her up at a bus station. Mary Shaw, 67, never told her children. Charlene Knox, 62, received stolen poetry. Vera Fields, 68, died by suicide in 2021. Their emails surfaced later. Donna Ricks, 73, testified from Little Rock. "He didn't take my money. He took the part of me that still believed I mattered." The courtroom was silent when Margaret testified. Cameras weren't allowed. Only a sketch showing her sitting tall, navy blouse, pearl earrings. She read a single page. You wore someone else's face because you knew yours wasn't worthy of trust. But you can't fake a soul. And you can't erase me. The jury deliberated 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Aggravated sexual battery, digital exploitation of vulnerable adults, identity fraud, and telecommunications felony. The sentence: 31 years. No parole. No early release. When he was led away, the courtroom was still. The only sound was the squeak of his shoes. Margaret never looked at him again. She doesn't call herself a survivor. She calls herself a witness to silence, to neglect, to what it costs when voices are ignored. Back in Michigan, she started something new. From her living room, with a borrowed laptop and a folding church chair, she launched Face the Truth, a nonprofit for women over 60, victims of online predators. No funding, no office, just a mission. She handed out pamphlets in libraries, spoke in fellowship halls, warned women at senior centers. She didn't beg for sympathy. She gave tools. She taught reverse image searches, showed how fake phrasing worked, explained when love was just manipulation. More women came forward. A widow in Flint who sent gift cards to a preacher. A retired teacher in Gary asked to co-sign a loan. A hospice volunteer in Dayton who gave out Wi-Fi and lost her Social Security benefits. Margaret didn't just advise. She armed them with knowledge. With Carmen's help, she built checklists for spotting scams. She created referral pipelines with trauma counselors. She lobbied for digital exploitation laws to be treated like physical abuse. She stood in front of state reps and told them the numbers. 88,000 romance fraud reports in a single year, over half targeting seniors. She wouldn't let the world look away. Today, Face the Truth runs free digital literacy classes, offers legal consultation referrals, and operates an anonymous hotline staffed by women Margaret herself once helped. On her office wall, she framed a photo, her and Carmen, taken the day she testified. No makeup, just her. Steady eyes, squared shoulders, navy blouse. Beneath it, she wrote a quote by hand. If you're over 60, they think you won't fight back. They think you'll ignore red flags. But they forget one thing. We remember everything. And now, Margaret Shaw makes sure the world doesn't forget either. Because there are thousands of Margarets still out there. Thousands still answering messages from faces that don't exist. Thousands still hoping that love might finally mean what it says. Every time we stay silent, another predator gets away. With a new name, a new lie, a new victim. So tell her story, share it, talk about it. Because the next one could be your mother, your neighbor, your friend,